is Metal Roofing University with Adam and Mason.
Welcome to another episode of Metal Roofing University. I'm your host, Adam Clark, and my cohort, as always,
Mason Burchett.
Hey, Mason,
nice
how
to
you
be
doing?
Here. Good.
Yeah. Hey, so today we're going to follow up on a blog post that you wrote the other day, talking about why you can find metal roofing materials cheaper in key locations, and what does that mean for the end user, and what do they need to maybe be cautious of? Because we have the mindset here, you kind of get what you pay for.
That's right.
And I think that is something that echoes in many different industries, but in particular with metal roofing, a lot of homeowners and end users may not have the technical knowledge or may not even have access to the technical knowledge to know that they're getting a quality product. So I thought today it would make sense for us to just dive deep into your post and make sure that everybody's educated on what is actually involved with their metal and metal roofing system.
Yeah, so on the outset, let's talk about some good things that have come to light from the education factor, especially from the end user's perspective, is the attention that's been brought to varying paint systems. We're going to circle around about this, but this is why I even wrote this blog post in the first place. I'm excited to see that I think the industry as a whole is doing better about bringing attention to different kinds of paint systems and paint systems that are subpar, that should not be used for residential use, and premium systems that are approved for residential use. That said, I think there's a lot of homeowners now that are aware of that issue that weren't previously. I also think because of that, some people in the industry have adapted, and whether intentionally or not, to exploit that. But because the truth is that's not the only thing that factors in to your metal roofing system and what makes it a good one or a bad one, essentially.
Right, so we're going to dive into a couple key categories here, and we're going to touch on the things that we think bring the most value and longevity to a roofing system, and try to give everybody a perspective that there are inferior products that are being pushed to the market. Again, even though we've seen improvement, Best Buy Metals has even seen that, where we used to carry secondary paint systems for people who are looking for a very low cost, whether it be a hunting blind or whether it be a barn and on their property where no one's going to see it. We found that there was just not perfect integrity with the materials being maybe purchased by a contractor, being purchased and distributed, where the end user was fully aware of what the warranty status of their product was. So, at Best Buy Metals, we decided to move away from secondary systems altogether. And again, we've seen a lot of our good competitors do the same thing, but we are at kind of a strange phase in the metal roofing world where the industry is really growing quickly. We have a lot of new roll formers coming in. We have a lot of people who have seen that it's not really a complicated process to make coils into panels, so they're trying to do it themselves, but when they're looking at the expenses of a premium painted coil with a 40-plus year warranty versus some of these thrifty panels or thrifty coils, they sometimes make the decision to put a less quality product out as the same quality of some of these premium products, because that's the only way they can get into the market. So we're going to talk about steel. We're going to talk about the substrate, the coating that goes on top of the steel but under the paint. Of course, we're going to talk about paint, some of the additional components with the roof system and service that complements those. So, Mason, why don't we just jump right into the steel side, since that's kind of the core product that we're talking about. Give us a little bit of a distinction between some of the premier or premium products that we have when it comes to steel coils and some of the things that we need to be aware of and our end users need to be aware of.
Yeah, so, there's two generic categories that we can start with on a high level, and that's domestic steel and foreign steel. So steel where the quality is controlled here in the United States, where quality standards are much higher than they are abroad. And then there's a lot of imported steel as well, where obviously the United States has less control over the quality, and you see the quality of the steel go down a lot into what a lot of people call pot metal, which is kind of a slang term for steel that's quote unquote watered down with other types of metal or higher portions of iron or so on and so forth, that really bring the quality of that steel down, and that's something that's not always detectable. So at Best Buy Metals, we are committed to working with domestic steel here in the United States, where we know that the quality of that steel is held to a higher standard than a lot of imported products are.
Yeah, and the risk that you run into with this pot metal or this pot steel or foreign steel, and it's not all bad. We want to be clear, it's not all bad.
But it's hard to detect.
It's hard to tell. Yeah, when it comes in, the standards, the measurements have been taken as far as the hardness of the metal, as far as what is the actual makeup of the material. There's some spot testing that is done when materials get stateside, but it's not the same type of quality standards and consistent quality standards that we see with domestic suppliers. So like Mason mentioned, we are committed at Best Buy Metals to be working with domestic steel. We feel that it gives us an advantage because you always get what you pay for. You know, there's a consistency to that for us as purchasing the steel, and then what we're able to pass along to our customers, knowing and having the confidence that we are going to be able to provide a product that does not have weak spots, is not going to break down, is not going to fail where we need it to be consistent. We need it to be establishing confidence within the industry. And some of the things that we have seen from our domestic partners, from our partners here in the United States, is just a really intentional push to help educate the consumers in the United States about the difference between the domestic steel and foreign steel. You know, we had some tariffs that came in on foreign steel back in 2018. The government applied some tariffs that made it a little bit harder for the mass quantities of foreign steel to come in, which actually was helpful, even though it created some hardships in the industry. It was actually helpful in the long term to get more domestic steel to you, the end user. Yeah. And that's something that we really appreciate about our domestic partners, is that they're really making a push to be a better option than foreign steel. Because really before 2018, foreign steel was much more prevalent in our industry. And again, there was quality standards that we were fearful that they weren't being passed along to the general public. You know, our customers had the confidence that they were getting domestic steel. That's what we promised, and that's what we provide. But the industry, the health of the industry, is important to us, and we feel like we have a little more security in that now.
Yeah, that's right. So that's definitely one of the first things we can talk about, because the core of your metal roofing system is the quality of the metal, the quality of the steel. That's what the foundation of your roofing system is the quality of that steel. So that's really the first thing that you should ask your supplier about. Mm-hmm. And if they can't give you a clear answer on the quality of the steel,
or where it comes from,
or where it's sourced, then that's going to be your first red flag. That's going to be something that you want to consider heavily before you make a sizable purchase for your home.
And we're not just talking about, I mean, we are talking about quality, but we're also talking about supporting domestic businesses.
Right.
and our economic standpoint. You know, we believe that it's important for us to be manufacturing and buying in the United States, and that's part of our core business, and that's part of how we've developed our model. So apart from just the quality standards, which is what we're focusing on today, the byproduct of that is also being able to support our local and our U.S. economy by partnering with domestic steel providers. So,
and it's fair to ask those questions. I'll
absolutely
say that it's fair. It's completely fair to and if your supplier gets upset with you for questioning the integrity of the material, then again, that's a red flag. Like you said earlier in the episode, a lot of people have learned that it's not hard to turn a flat piece of metal into a formed piece of metal. That's true. We're not going to get into manufacturing processes in this episode. There's a lot more to it than that to ensure that you have consistent quality materials over a long span of time, right, which we won't dive into, right, because that's a huge rabbit hole.
Right.
But that said, a lot of people don't realize that, and they jump into the manufacturing world and are just cranking out steel, and they don't they don't even know. And so there's a lot of people I really believe that are not being intentionally dishonest. They don't know completely the differences in quality of steel, the differences in paint system, the differences in substrate, which is what we're about to get into.
And I know we're not going to jump into this because it's not part of our summary for today, but equipment is also another huge component to making sure you get a quality product. At Best Buy Metals, we buy premium roll formers, and they are very expensive.
That's right.
And we've decided that investment produces an end product that not only installs correctly and creates a watertight system, but also is aesthetically pleasing to the end user. There are roll formers out there that you can buy that are much cheaper than what we have here. But what we have discovered as we've come up, against some of these people in our markets is that you have a smaller machine with less dies or less forming dies, and they put more stress on the metal. They create a less consistent panel rib, so it's not as straight or as linear, and they create oil canning and waviness within the panel. That's something that you don't want. On your roof, if you look up at your roof, you want it to look uniform throughout the entire roof, and you want to know that you're not getting something that's come off of a machine that put too much stress on the metal or on the substrate or on the paint and is going to cause it to fail. We won't go into that right now, but just know
that'll be a good episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about manufacturing, and maybe we'll do some videos to show what we do here.
That'll be good.
Mason, let's jump into substrates next. So we talked about steel, the value and the consistency of quality domestic steel. Let's talk about the substrate now. It's the next layer of the form of the panel.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll probably talk a little bit about substrate and paint here in conjunction because they work so closely together. When we're talking about the substrate of your material, we talked about the foundation of it, the base of it, which is that steel. That's the core of the material, right? Well, on top of that, we have what's called a substrate, which is a protective layer that is going to help keep the steel, the foundation of your material, from being exposed to the elements and breaking down, becoming susceptible to rust, and eventually would cause material failure. So substrates are extremely important, and we'll throw a few words out there that probably everybody's familiar with. One of them would be galvanized. A lot of people have heard of galvanized metal, galvanized tin. Galvanized is a type of substrate. It's also a type of coating, and there's a lot of different levels of it. People hear of G90 galvanized, G60 galvanized, and those are different weights of galvanization. What galvanized is essentially just a zinc coating that goes over top of steel, and it protects it somewhat from the elements. That's the really shiny looking silver stuff on your grandpa's barn. That's probably galvanized metal. Galvanized can also be used as a substrate under paint, and it is a lot of suppliers offer that, and most often as an agricultural type of panel, which is what it should be used for. It's not approved for residential use. It shouldn't be used for most residential applications. Another cousin to galvanized coatings is something called Galvalume, which a lot of people are getting more familiar with, but maybe less familiar with. Galvalume is kind of what it sounds like. It's a mixture of zinc and aluminum, which allows it to perform much better than galvanized coatings over a long period of time. So Galvalume is pretty much the gold standard in the metal roofing industry when it comes to quality substrates underneath your paint. So you've got a steel panel that is then coated in this Galvalume protective coating, and that takes place before the paint system ever goes on top. And so the blog post that I wrote was breaking down what that Galvalume substrate really is and the qualities that you should look for, because as people get more familiar, Adam, with the term Galvalume and what it is and what it's supposed to do, it becomes kind of a blanket term in the industry that says, yep, the Galvalume is that coating that protects the steel underneath your paint, and that's all people talk about. The truth is there are multiple categories of Galvalume, and that have different weights, that have different thicknesses, and that perform differently across the industry. There are types of Galvalume that technically aren't even Galvalume, and we'll talk about that in a second, that should never be used for residential applications. So that's kind of a high-level overview about what we're about to dive into a little more. Galvalume is the substrate that we use underneath the paint system to protect the bare steel.
So we're going to be talking about essentially 3 different types of substrates. Galvanized, which Mason already defined. Galvalume, which is our core, our primary substrate for our residential and light commercial painted materials, and even some of our heavy commercial painted materials. But there's a third option, and it's sometimes referred to as Galvalume, but it's actually not quite Galvalume. It's a little bit different than, it's actually a lot different than what we use on the substrate of our coils. So Mason, let's talk a little bit about the weight, Galvalume, how it's measured, how it's weighted, and this alternative option that is available in the market that people should be pretty cautious of.
Sure. So again, let's break down Galvalume. The word Galvalume is actually just a registered trademark that is used to define something called aluminum zinc coatings, right? So like we talked about, Galvalume is a mixture of aluminum and zinc. And so there's different types of Galvalume that are represented by different designators. These designators would be things like AZ50, AZ40, AZ35. Those are all things that people in the industry will call Galvalume, but they're 3 different types of substrates. They're 3 different substrates. And so what you were talking about, Adam, is the different weights and the different thicknesses of those. A quality Galvalume substrate, like what we use here at Best Buy Metals, is something called AZ50. It is 55% aluminum. It's about 43% zinc, and then there's 2% of some fillers like silicon in there. But it's essentially a 55-43 zinc aluminum mixture. That 50 designator stands for the weight of that Galvalume coating, Adam. So when we see AZ50, we know that it weighs 0.5 ounces per square foot of material. That translates down into the other forms of Galvalume. So if you see AZ40, you know that's going to stand for 0.4 ounces per square foot. AZ35 stands for 0.35 ounces per square foot. So those designators tell you how much that these Galvalume layers weigh. And so some people would think, well, that's just a few decimal places, right? That's not that much of a drastic difference. It's a substantial difference. It's a substantial difference, so much of a difference, in fact, that AZ35, technically, Adam, is not even considered Galvalume, and the registered trademark owners of Galvalume do not allow AZ35 to be classified as such.
What does that mean if somebody is using or somebody's promoting an AZ35 substrate on a painted panel to a homeowner?
There is a set of universally recognized code requirements called the International Residential Code, and essentially almost every county in the United States is going to adhere to those standards. AZ35 is such a thin substrate. It's only 1.12 mil. It only weighs 0.35 ounces per square foot. It is not approved. It does not meet International Residential Code requirements. So what that means is when you have somebody that's saying, yeah, we use Galvalume underneath our paint, but they actually use AZ35, they're being highly deceptive. It's not allowed to market that as a Galvalume product, and it's not allowed to be used for residential applications. So when you have somebody that's saying, yeah, this is a residential metal roofing panel, this has Galvalume underneath it, but it's an AZ35 substrate, Adam, they're opening themselves up to litigation when that metal roofing system fails, because it's an inferior product. It was never intended to be used as a residential application. And if you really dig into the standards that the steel industry holds, it's universally recognized that it should not be used in residential use.
Well, and I think as an end user, as a consumer of products, one of the things that you should be looking for is anything that says secondary or thrifty or something that's 15, 20, 25 cents below the standard 40-year warranty materials. Then you start talking about this AZ35 non-approved residential substrate, and it really should be an indicator to stop and say, am I even allowed to use that? I know building codes vary per location, but if you're in an area where you're going to be under some scrutiny about the materials, the building materials that you're using, just recognize an AZ35 is not going to be approved, and you should always be pursuing that AZ50 substrate for your residential application. So again, if you hear the word thrifty or if you hear secondary, that's going to be something you really want to be cautious of, because there is a chance that it's not only a paint issue, but it may be a substrate issue, and it may be something that challenges the validity of your building materials.
Yeah, and so here's why that's important. It's not just because some people might be willing to say, well, I'll take the risk. If it just weighs a little bit less, I don't really care. You should care, and here's why. AZ50 carries by itself a 20-year rust-through warranty because it can withstand the elements. AZ35 has 0 corrosion warranty, 0. So when you have a metal roofing panel, you say, well, if it's painted, what's the big deal? It's got a paint over top of it, so it's going to be fine. And this is what we'll talk about here in just a second. Well, it's not going to be fine, because all around the perimeter of your metal roofing panel, you have edges that aren't painted. And this is where the substrate plays a key role. It also plays a key role in the manufacturing processes like we were talking about earlier, which hopefully we'll dive into in a different episode. But this is where it also plays a key role. That Galvalume substrate is what protects and prevents rust from creeping in on those quote-unquote exposed edges all around the perimeter of your panel, around the edges of the panel. That's why it's so important to have a quality Galvalume. If you have an inferior substrate like this AZ35, you're going to have rust creep up through the panel and rust through the panel, and the paint's not going to stop it because it's going to be happening below the paint.
And that's a question we get asked all the time. What's my liability, or what's the risk of the cut edge of the panel, whether it's a machine cut that we do here at our facility or whether it's a hip or a valley panel that's cut on site? And as long as the cutting practices are following the standards, using shears instead of using saw blades, you do get this you kind of get this sealing. A good pair of snips will actually help to seal around the cut edge and kind of pull the bottom primer and the top primer to meet where the edge connects. Now, the thicker your substrates are, the more security you'll have there. The thinner it is, the more steel, a higher percentage of steel is going to be exposed upon the edge, and you're going to see rusting. So we never see rusting on the edge of our panels. Again, that's a question we're asked all the time. Well, isn't that exposed steel? Yes, it is, but you have this substrate that's helping to protect this rust creep from happening. You can go and you can look at metal roofs, good quality metal roofs that have been installed. We've been around for 20 years, been selling products for 20 years. We can go and look at a roof that was sold 20 years ago, knowing what we know about our products, and we don't see any of this corrosion. We don't see any of this creep happening, and that's going to be something that's really important. And I would imagine that that's probably one of the key contributors to the AZ35 not being recognized as an approved product. What's the group that you said, or what's the approval?
The International Residential Code.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that I would imagine that's probably why they've looked at the AZ35 and said that's not gonna get us where we want to be.
100%. There's too high of a risk of rust through.
Yeah. Okay. So there's your substrate again, and everything serves. Everything can serve its purpose, like galvanized. G90 galvanized actually resists fumes from chemical byproducts, like animal byproducts, better than an AZ55 Galvalume, which is why for agricultural applications, galvanized is still used. That's great. AZ50 is ideal for residential and commercial applications. AZ35 can still serve a purpose. If you're looking for a carport or if you're looking for a low quality product, it's a cheaper product for a cheaper price. That can serve a purpose, but should that be used for a residence? Should that be used for something that a homeowner is trying to get 40 plus years out of. No, it shouldn't be. I mean, if you're looking for a cheap product, then yeah, AZ35 may be okay, but the problem is there's not perfect transparency in the industry. You don't always know what you're getting, which is why Best Buy Metals, and again, many of our good competitors that we really value, they are saying we're just not going to touch the AZ35. We're not going to put it out there. We're not going to make that a temptation for anybody to try to save a few bucks to get a product that's not going to leave them as satisfied as they would with the quality product. We've already done an episode on paint, but let's just touch on that real quick because we know that complements the substrate so much. There's two primary paint systems that we work with on the residential side, or there's one that we work with. There's two that are available to the market. The SMP, which stands for a siliconized modified polyester, and then the straight poly paint or polyester paint system. And again, the poly system typically complements the AZ35. It's an inferior product that ages faster, and even though paint thicknesses are typically similar, you're not going to see, AZ35 and the AZ50 have a thickness difference. With paint, they typically paint similarly, but what you have is you have pigments that change much more quickly in the poly paint system, which is why we always promote the SMP, the siliconized modified polyester system. It comes with a 40-year warranty on the paint system. So basically it's saying your colors should not change more than 7 delta units, which to the layman doesn't mean a whole lot, but consider automotive paint. How long have you had a car? What has the color change look like? The paint systems with our metal roofing should age even better than what we see in the automotive world. I mean, really, that's what we're boasting. You do not get that with the poly system, and really with poly paint or secondary paint, you have 0 warranty, similar to the AZ35. There's no confidence that the product is going to do what anybody really wants it to do, so you're not going to see a warranty on it. So again, if you see Thrifty, or even if you see a Thrifty 10-year warranty, the paint is going to fade. The manufacturer of that system may stand behind it for 10 years, but if you really go into the fine details on the warranty, you'll see maybe that's against cracking and chalking. It's not going to be against color fade. That's something that you really want to make sure that you're being mindful of. So asking these questions, where does the steel come from? What's the substrate? Is that an AZ50 substrate? And what type of paint system do we have? Is that a SMP? Is that a poly paint system? What's the warranty on those things? If you're not getting a 40-year warranted paint system for your residential application, you're getting something that's not going to give you what you want or what you need for the most part. Again, most people are looking for value, and value comes in longevity with metal roofing. That's what we want to promote, and that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm going to marry what you just said to what we talked about previously with the substrates. And we'll circle back around because I want to talk about some of the things you said just now. But you should, of course, be examining the paint system, like you said. If you're not getting a 40-year paint warranty, you're getting something that's inferior. Along with that, these 3 things we've talked about so far, the steel, the substrate, and the paint, need to be evaluated independently, and they also need to be cross-referenced with one another. The whole reason I wrote that post was because there are a lot of people in the industry that are boasting 40-year warranties because they're putting a 40-year warranty paint on an inferior substrate like AZ35, which is a waste of time, and it's highly deceptive. Because again, your substrate's going to start failing underneath the paint system, and the paint system is going to fail as a result of it. So even if you're finding 40-year paint warranty materials and they're substantially less from a price standpoint than reputable companies that have been around for a long time are offering, that's a red flag. And that's not to say always go with the most expensive thing. Do your due diligence as a consumer and shop around. But if you're seeing something that is a substantial gap between seemingly same warranties, that should be a huge red flag and is likely going to point to an inferior substrate or an inferior steel. Okay. So that said, yeah, circling back around to the poly and the SMP, this is another thing that gives metal roofing a bad name because not a lot of people are doing a very good job educating on different types of paint systems. And so what you have is consumers that are looking at color charts, they're coming in and looking at panels, and they're like, well, these look the exact same. That red looks just like this red. This green
today.
This green looks just like this green. But the truth is, and some cases 5-7 years, that green's going to turn yellow or that red's going to turn light pink. And beyond just the color, the paint system may fail prematurely as well. So it's not worth the risk of buying an inferior paint system to save
10 cents,
10, 15 cents a foot.
Yeah. And just to break it down for most people, when you're talking about, our average roof, let's say that it's 1,200 linear feet of panels, so 3,600 feet of roof square footage. That's a good size home. That's probably in the realm of being our average size. You're talking about saving, if you're paying an extra 10 cents for the premium or taking 10 cents away to go with a thrifty panel, it's $120 on the entire roof system that you're sacrificing. It's $120 on the entire roof system that you're sacrificing. Years, the longevity, decades to get a product that looks good for 40 years. To me, the payoff just doesn't make sense. And so that's really the message is, what's the value benchmark for you? Is it worth saving $120 to have a green roof that turns to lime green in 5 years? A lot of people, if you stop and you think about that, this is your home. This is your roof. You shouldn't have to replace it again. It's a metal roof. You shouldn't have to replace it again. Don't let the aesthetics change that.
Would you buy a car? Would you buy a red sports car that was going to turn light pink in 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely not.
There's no way.
No way. Right?
There's no way I would do that.
Yeah, and so roofing is no different.
Right.
Again, roofing is no different. One more thing I wanted to, again, without maybe going into too much detail, but the steel industry is a little bit awkward right now. We have this huge influx of demand, and supply has been compromised a little bit with COVID. We've had back in the first parts of the year when COVID first came out, we had some slowdown in production because the mills weren't exactly sure what was going to happen. Nobody knew. And it's been really exciting to see this, but our industry, building materials, has really just skyrocketed this year. The mills are trying to get back to a place where they're producing the output that they had pre-COVID, but it's taken some time. Mills can't just turn off and turn back on as quickly as say a sales office like we do here. So there is a steel shortage right now, and that's fine. That's fine. Steel is still available, but what's happening is more people have gone and they've bought new roll formers, they've bought equipment. They're discovering they just made this big investment to buy equipment. They bought probably a building, forklifts. Coils are not available. New business is not happening right now for most of the coil providers, most of the reputable coil providers out there. So what these people are doing who have just made this huge investment is they're panicking. And they're getting any coil that they can get right now because they need to turn their machines on to start paying for their investment. And so what we're seeing the bottom of the barrel coils being presented to these people who have become desperate for it, and that's putting some bad material out into the market, and that's something that we really want to fight against. Obviously, we don't want anybody to suffer or struggle. These individuals who have bought this equipment, the timing is just really unfortunate for them. But what we're concerned about is the health of the industry and the end user. That you guys are our customer, and we don't want you to be tempted or deceived to get a product that is not going to perform to the standards that the metal roofing industry has been boasting about. And we really want everyone to be aware that inferior steel is out there. Asking these questions is so important to make sure you know what you're getting.
Yeah, and so, in conclusion to those three categories that we essentially just covered, the value proposition that you get from a reputable metal roofing supplier like Best Buy Metals is, number one, we've been around. We've been around for 2 decades. We've stood the test of time. We've been through some hard economic times, and we made it through it. A reputable company this is the first thing you really should be looking for, and that's something you get here. The other value proposition that we get is the assurance of domestic steel that is checked with the quality standards in the United States that are unmatched anywhere else in the world. You're also getting the confidence that the substrate is, number one, approved for residential use and is the appropriate weight, is an industry-wide accepted weight and thickness to protect the steel that is covering your home. And then finally, you're getting a quality, again, domestically sourced paint system, a paint system where the quality standards are regulated here in the United States, that carries a true 40-year plus warranty.
Yeah, and just two more things that you get with a reputable partner, material provider that has become really important is one, adjacent accessories and components. The substrate, the steel and the paint are obviously very important. That's the core of our conversation today. But also know that a roofing system is not complete if you don't have screws.
That's right.
Right? You're not able to secure the system down if you don't have fasteners. You're not able to properly seal the roof off if you don't have closures and sealants. So you can't flash around a PVC pipe if you don't have a pipe boot.
Yeah.
So all of these products, you can buy inferior options with them as well.
Yep.
There's a lot of really, really cheap. So when I'm saying cheap, I'm referring to inexpensive and poor quality products that are out there that can look like they are going to serve the purpose of completing this roof system, but they're not, and they're going to fail. You're going to have rubber boots that are not UV resistant, that break down in just a couple of years. They crumble and they fall away, and you're going to have water getting into the roof where you have PVC pipes coming up. You're going to have caulking that is a silicon-based caulking and not a butyl-based caulking, which is going to dry up due to the heat and the UV exposure on a metal roof. You need to have this butyl-based caulking. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to be malleable and to shift and move with a metal roof over the entire lifespan of that roof. And you're going to have screws, again, where in our industry, there's the temptation to just do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
A lot of people in our industry are using a number 9 wood screw to secure the exposed fastened panel down. Well, we've done our research. We know what the pull-out levels are with number 9s, and we decided this years ago that our standard screw was going to be a number 10, which means it's a thicker shaft, has thicker threads, or they cover a wider diameter, and they have a much higher resistance to pull out and backing out. We use and we offer specialized screws that create a steel dome over the neoprene rubber washer. So the neoprene rubber is already UV resistant, but what's better than being UV resistant? Just not being exposed to UV, exactly. Not being exposed to the rays of the sun. So we have this metal dome that can come and sit over the neoprene rubber washer to help ensure that it does not dry out and become brittle, and the seal around that puncture hole continues to be reliable for the life of the system. So components are really an important part of roofing systems, and if you are not getting quality parts, if you're not getting quality components, you can buy really great steel, but if your screws start to fail, it doesn't matter how well the steel is doing, you're going to have issues with the system, the roofing system itself. So the components are a big part of creating a watertight, lifelong system.
Yeah, and the point we're trying to make here, the whole reason we do Metal Roofing University is the technology is there for a metal roof to truly be the last roof that you ever need to place on your home. The technology exists. This is not something that's experimental. The components you're talking about, the quality components exist. The checks and balances, the quality standards for the steel, the substrate, the paint, all of that exists. All of that stuff is things that Best Buy Metals provides and seeks to educate our consumers on. And what you just said, if you find a supplier that is willing to sacrifice the quality of the steel, to sacrifice the quality of the substrate or the paint, they're going to be willing to sacrifice the quality of the fasteners, of the pipe boots, of the sealants. It's a trickle-down effect. And if you're willing to compromise on those core foundational parts of metal roofing, you're going to be willing to compromise on the other stuff, and you're going to have a system that fails you prematurely, and you're going to be out of money. So that's why we're here, is to let people know that this stuff exists and it works as long as you take the time to do your due diligence, educate yourself, and make sure that you are getting what you're supposed to be getting.
And we'll conclude with the last part that I think is really important when it comes to just understanding what you pay for and what you're getting. and this is actually not even in regards to tangible products, it's the service that you get. You know, Mason and I dedicate time to do Metal Roofing University because we think it's important. This is a service that Best Buy Metals provides to make sure that everybody knows what to expect and what to be cautious of and what to look for when they're investigating a metal roof for their home application or for their application. And that doesn't just end with Mason and I. We spend a lot of time. We have Best Buy Metals Continued Education where we're doing monthly and sometimes more than that training with our sales team, with our manufacturing team to help make sure they know what industry trends are.
With our contractors too.
With our contractors, we do contractor certification training every month. We bring as many contractors in as we can hold, and we inform them about proper installation. We inform them about the accessories that are available and why we do things a certain way. And we think that service is the biggest complementing part to obviously the tangible side of the roof. You know, there's a lot of information that's out there. I mean, we live in the information age. There's a lot of information out there, but it can be confusing. And if you can't rely on the individual or the company that you're purchasing from to be able to give you confidence that they know what they're talking about and they're informed, then you should walk away from that situation. You know, there should be a sense of confidence in the company that you're partnering with because they're exposed to these things every single day. You know, Mason and I are exposed to metal roofing every single day. We don't take a break from it. We're interested in how the industry is developing. We're interested to know about new things that are going on or things that we should communicate to our customers that maybe they should be mindful of and they should be cautious of. So we want to make sure that service is always a part of what we do. Now, does service sometimes come with a cost? You know, because we don't train people off the clock. You know, we're paying them. You know, so that is part of our model, and there is an expense associated with that. And you know, you as a consumer have to ask, am I confident enough in my own knowledge and my own understanding of the industry to go and buy materials from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, or do I see value to possibly pay a little bit more to partner with someone that I know for sure is going to get it right?
Yeah, that's right. And the reason the things are set up the way that you were just talking about, Adam, is because we do this with the confidence that we're giving them the best service and the best product. And that way you don't have to do this again. And that way this is the last time that you have to do it. And we're not the only ones. We're not so presumptuous to think that we're the only people that are doing it right. There are other people out there that are doing it right. Plenty of companies that we work with on a daily basis are doing things right. So there are those out there, even if it's not us, even if you don't wind up buying with Best Buy Metals. These are standards that anybody that is doing it right, that's reputable, are going to adhere to. And so you can find these standards where you're at.
Yeah, and our encouragement is to be bold to ask the questions. Where did the steel come from? Is this an AZ50 substrate? What type of paint system is this? What's the warranty associated?
And if you start asking those questions and people start sweating, you know, and you're in the wrong place.
Sweating or scratching their head.
That old crap look.
Right.
This guy knows what he's talking about. That's not something you want to see. It doesn't instill a lot of confidence.
So be bold to ask questions. Be bold to ask questions to Best Buy Metals. You know, even if you're not sure that we're the best partner for you, but we've said something that has sparked your interest and you want to investigate with us a little bit more, give us a call or hit us up on any of our social pages, and we'll be happy to communicate that with you. Again, we are a service-based company. You know, we're a service-based company that happens to make metal roofing. You know, and we really stand by that, and that's something that we take great pride in. So we appreciate the industry. We love the industry that we're in. We want to make sure that it's as healthy as possible, and that starts with a demand from our customers and the industry customers for the best products available.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's really up to you guys in the end to make us better, and so we're hopefully giving you the information and the questions to ask to do that. All right, guys, so thanks again for tuning in to the Metal Roofing University podcast. If you liked what you hear, please consider subscribing. You can check out, if you're listening on audio only, you can check out the video of this on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, you can check out the audio version of it anywhere podcasts are streamed. So we'll catch you next time.